I'm very concerned with Sekou. He should be having the most fun of anybody. Have all the girls and fun and whatever you want to do.
Huh? Make it the
Sekou Doumbouya, born December 23, 2000. There was something fascinating about the way the basketball world talked about Sekou Doumbouya before he ever stepped foot onto an NBA floor. He wasn't a top 5 pick or viewed as someone who would immediately change the Detroit Pistons, but there was a genuine belief they had found one of the biggest steals of the 2019 NBA draft. At 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan, years of professional experience overseas, and incredible physical tools, many saw him as the perfect modern NBA forward. Personally, I never bought into the hype the way a lot of people did. Every time I watched him, it felt like people were falling in love with the idea of Sekou Doumbouya more than the basketball player himself. In my opinion, the league had just watched Pascal Siakam help lead the Raptors to a championship, and teams immediately started searching for the next long, athletic, versatile African forward they could mold into a star. That's something the NBA has always done. Whenever one prototype succeeds, front offices start looking for the next version of it. The next Jordan, next Kobe, next Wemby, etc. Unfortunately for Detroit, this gamble never paid off. Doumbouya appeared in just 96 NBA games before his career shifted overseas. In today's feature, we'll talk about why one of the most intriguing prospects in this draft class became one of its biggest disappointments, and why I believe the NBA projected a future onto him that simply wasn't there. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know who I should do next. Sekou Doumbouya is a 6'9" forward from Conakry, Guinea, who moved to France at a young age and developed into one of Europe's most intriguing NBA prospects. Unlike most players entering the draft, Doumbouya didn't come through the American high school or college system. Instead, he began playing professionally in France's second division at just 15 years old, before eventually earning minutes in the country's top league. His combination of youth, size, length, and professional experience quickly made him one of the most fascinating long-term projects in the 2019 NBA draft. Rather than evaluating Doumbouya for the player he already was, much of the excitement centered around the player scouts believed he could become. At 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan, many viewed him as having the physical tools to eventually develop into the type of versatile two-way forward every NBA team was searching for. His offensive game was raw, but because he was only 18 years old, most believed there was plenty time for those skills to develop. With the 15th overall pick in the 2019 NBA draft, the Detroit Pistons decided the potential was worth the gamble. Entering a rebuilding phase, the organization wasn't looking for immediate production as much as future upside. Doumbouya became the youngest player in the NBA that season, and Detroit hoped patience would eventually be rewarded. Instead, what looked like a promising investment on draft night quickly unraveled, setting the stage for one of the most disappointing careers of the 2019 draft class. Stunt number 1, the NBA fell in love with the prototype. I think one of the biggest mistakes Detroit made with Sekou Doumbouya was evaluating him based on where they hoped the league was going instead of where his game actually was. And to be fair, they weren't the only team guilty of it. The NBA has always been a copycat league. Whenever a certain type of player proves successful, front offices immediately begin searching for the next version of him. We saw it after Shaq, LeBron, after Dirk Nowitzki, Steph Curry, Giannis, and I believe we saw it again after Pascal Siakam helped the Toronto Raptors win the 2019 NBA championship. It may not have been a huge influence, but in my opinion, it helped Doumbouya's case. Siakam wasn't just a great player, he became proof that a long athletic forward with professional experience overseas could blossom into an all-star if developed correctly. Just weeks later, the Pistons were on the clock, staring at another 6'9" international forward with a 7-foot wingspan, years of professional experience, and plenty untapped potential. To me, it felt like they weren't just drafting Sekou Doumbouya, they were drafting the possibility that he could become their own version of the next modern two-way star. The problem is, projecting a player's ceiling is one thing, actually helping him reach it is something completely different. Almost immediately, Doumbouya's development hit roadblocks. Before the regular season even began, he suffered a concussion during training camp that delayed his start. Once healthy, Detroit assigned him to the G League to continue developing him before eventually bringing him to the NBA. Then, just as he was beginning to receive more consistent opportunities, the COVID-19 pandemic shut the league down, ending his rookie season after only 38 games. Now, I don't believe the concussion or pandemic ruined Sekou Doumbouya's career. Every young player dealt with the same uncertainty during that period, but for someone who was drafted almost entirely because of what he might become, losing valuable development time certainly didn't help. The Pistons selected one of the rawest prospects in the NBA draft, expecting patience to eventually pay dividends. Instead, the very first season that was supposed to lay the foundation for his future became fragmented from start to finish. And when your entire value is built around long-term potential, every missed opportunity to develop makes that projection a little harder to believe. Stunt number 2, his physical profile never translated. One thing I've always believed about basketball is that measurements can get you drafted, but they can't keep you in the NBA. Eventually your game has to match the body everyone fell in love with. And with Sekou Doumbouya, I don't think that ever happened. Coming into the draft, people constantly pointed to his 6'9" frame and 7-foot wingspan. Those numbers sounded perfect for the modern NBA, which made the vision easy to picture. A long, versatile forward who could guard multiple positions, switch defensively, run the floor, and eventually develop into a mismatch on offense. It all sounded great on paper, but every time I watched him play, I kept asking myself one question: what position is he actually supposed to play? Despite standing 6'9", I never thought he had the physical presence to constantly play power forward in the NBA. He wasn't the type of athlete that overwhelmed defenders with strength or explosiveness, and once he reached the league, the size advantage he enjoyed as a teenager overseas disappeared almost overnight. Instead of looking physically gifted, he often looked caught somewhere in between. Too light to consistently battle bigger forwards, but not skilled enough to thrive as a perimeter wing. And that's where the rest of his game started working against him. He wasn't someone you could hand the ball to and expect him to create his own shot. His handle was limited, his outside jumper never became reliable, and he didn't possess the kind of burst that allowed him to consistently beat defenders off the dribble. Even offensively without the ball, he wasn't an elite vertical athlete who could simply survive by finishing lobs around the basket. So if he couldn't create offense, couldn't stretch the floor, and couldn't dominate physically inside, what exactly was his offensive identity? Defensively, the questions were similar. The hope was that his length would make him a versatile stopper, but having long arms isn't the same as being an elite defender. Defensive instincts, positioning, anticipation, and physicality matter just as much, and those areas never developed enough to separate him from the average NBA forward. Looking back, I think Detroit drafted the measurements before they drafted the basketball player. They saw the prototype every front office was chasing and believed the rest of his game would eventually catch up. Unfortunately, it never did. As soon as that happened, his potential quickly disappeared. Stunt number 3, potential has an expiration date. And finally, this is important for all prospects to comprehend. Potential doesn't last forever. It's one of the most valuable currencies in the NBA, but it's also one of the quickest to lose its value. Teams will happily invest years into developing a teenager with upside, but eventually they stop asking what you could become and start asking what you can do for them right now. Unfortunately for Sekou Doumbouya, he never reached that point before the league began moving on. After 2 seasons in Detroit, the Pistons had seen enough. They included Doumbouya in the trade that brought veteran center DeAndre Jordan to Detroit, a clear indication that the organization no longer viewed him as part of its long-term future. For a rebuilding team to move on from a 20-year-old former first-round pick that quickly says a lot about how little progress they believed he had made. From there, Doumbouya entered the stage of an NBA career that almost always determines whether someone sticks around or disappears. Brooklyn acquired him in the trade, only to flip him to Houston a month later. The Rockets waived him the very next day. The Lakers then took a chance on him with a 2-way contract, but after appearing in just 2 NBA games, they moved on as well. They even brought him back on another 2-way deal later that season, only to waive him again before he could appear in another NBA game. When multiple organizations keep reaching the same conclusion, it becomes difficult to argue that the problem was simply the situation. That's why I always say potential has an expiration date. At 18 years old, teams convinced themselves they could teach you everything. At 22 or 23, they're no longer investing in dreams. They're looking for role players who already know exactly how they can help win basketball games. By that point, Sekou still hadn't established a reliable jumper, a dependable defensive identity, or an offensive skill that forced coaches to keep him on the floor. The questions that existed on draft night were still being asked years later. The good news is basketball careers don't always end when NBA careers do. Since leaving the league, Doumbouya has continued playing professionally overseas, where his athleticism and skill set fit the game much more naturally. But as far as the NBA was concerned, the window had closed. The league spent years betting on what Sekou Doumbouya might become. Eventually, it stopped waiting for that player to arrive. All in all, I think Sekou Doumbouya is another reminder that NBA potential can be one of the most misleading evaluations in sports. Sometimes we become so fascinated with what a player might become that we overlook who he actually is. That's exactly what I believed happened here. Detroit wasn't wrong for taking a chance on a young prospect with impressive physical tools. Every franchise has to gamble on upside from time to time. The mistake was believing those tools alone would eventually turn into a complete basketball player. I also don't think Sekou's career should be viewed as a complete failure. Very few people on the planet can say they've reached the NBA, and he's continued building a respectable career overseas in places like France, Japan, and currently in the Lebanese Basketball League. That's definitely something to be proud of. But when you're the 15th overall pick, expectations are naturally much higher than simply making the league and lasting just 96 games. Fair or not, you're judged against the player everyone believed you could become. Unfortunately for Doumbouya, the skills never caught up to the projection. In the end, the NBA didn't move on because he lacked potential. It moved on because after years of waiting, that potential never became production. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.